Those interviews are from a new oral history of the Obama administration compiled by Columbia University's Insight Institute. They reveal how little the Obama team thought of Donald Trump and his campaign chances. Like a lot of folks at the time, they thought he was a joke, a quote clown, a laughingstock, a con man. But as it turned out, Peter Baker writes, Mr. Obama and his advisors, like many others, missed the shifting mood of the country that would ultimately upend Mr. Axelrod's assumptions. Joining us, New York Times chief White House correspondent and MS Now contributor Peter Baker, smartest man I know, former special assistant to President Biden and former director of White House message planning Meghan Hayes, and former advisor to George W. Bush and Senator John McCain, Mark McKinnon. All right, so Peter, I think one of the good pieces of evidence, a good piece of trivia about how little Donald Trump was taken seriously back in 2015 was the fact that I got put on that campaign back then. I was a foreign correspondent who just happened to be in town visiting, and NBC wasn't going to waste one of their political folks on him because he wasn't seen as serious. That was what everyone believed, frankly, up until he won the nomination. What was the country, what was the Obama administration missing?
Yeah, I think you're right. And the story that I wrote does use the words like many others. I would include myself in that category. Certainly didn't see what was going to come down the pike. And I just think it's really fascinating to listen and watch and read these oral history transcripts and interviews just to sort of put yourself in that moment in that White House, right? They thought, done extraordinarily well by electing the first African-American in the history of the country, by taking the country out of the Great Recession, by saving the auto industry, pulling most troops home from Iraq. They felt they had a pretty good record. And they couldn't conceive of the idea that the country would turn from the man you see on your right to the man who was on the left. That Donald Trump is so different, not just in ideology and philosophy, although we switch back and forth between parties fairly often, but in temperament and demeanor and his whole outlook, right? As one of the interviewers said, he was a rebuke to everything we had done and everything we thought about the country. And I think it's just sort of a fascinating moment in history to look back on that White House in that moment. Again, they weren't alone, but it was a fascinating shift in the country that led to a different result in history where we are today.
So, 10 years later, 10 years later, Meghan, what have we learned?
It's interesting. I was in the White House when he announced and when he won, and no one was expecting it. Everyone thought it was a joke, and we all just sort of poo-pooed it. I remember sitting in my office when he walked down the stairs, and it was just sort of like, oh, this isn't going to go anywhere. And now look, we're in Trump 2.0. But I think the one thing that the Trump team should really take note of is that they are not tracking where the country is today, and they are going to face consequences for having that same mistake that the Democrats had in 2016 of not paying attention where the American people are and where the electorate is if they are not careful. We see a lot of the same trends happening today. People are not happy with their elected officials. People are not happy with the economy. And so they are going to face the same outcome that we faced in 2016.
Yeah, the argument was that, as Peter said a moment ago, that it was a rebuke of the Obama administration. Here's Josh Earnest talking about that.
I remember that many of my White House colleagues were shaken by the outcome, and both by the element of surprise. Nobody expected Trump to win. And I think not many people even expected that he had a chance to win. But also the sense that the outcome of the election was a direct rebuke of everything that we'd been trying to do for the last 10 years. And that feeling was unshakable.
So, as Meghan was just outlining, Mark, does Donald Trump need to worry? Does the Republican Party need to worry about a similar rebuke? We can put up the poll numbers. They're really bad. Donald Trump's poll numbers are really bad, both his overall approval, but also on every one of his signature issues.
Yes, absolutely they do, Katie. But I'll tell you the thing, the block that Donald Trump picked, and the reason it is so successfully, is that every presidential campaign I've been involved in or looked at throughout history, the winner was the candidate who best embraced the future. And Donald Trump, for the first time, embraced the past. Bob Dole tried to do that, in his convention speech. And Clinton turned it on him by saying, we're going to build a bridge to the 21st century, and captured that future election. So they'd all been about the future. But Trump, and starting with Make America Great Again, he was saying to people, I'll take you back at a time when people were, for the first time really maybe in America's history, fearful of the future. Too many changes, too much technology, too much immigration. And Trump figured that out. Now, is that the case today? Are people still afraid of the future, or are they still willing to embrace the past, which has had its consequences?
Well, I think we know the answer to that. They are afraid of the future. If you ask people, they are afraid about what's coming, especially young people. And there is a whole lot of nostalgia from the past. I mean, I see my teenager wearing the same clothes I wore when I was her age in the 90s, which is shocking. But I mean, it's not just that. The TV shows, there's a lot of 90s nostalgia. We talked about this yesterday. The Super Bowl ads were all 90s nostalgia, back toward a simpler time. So there is that desire to embrace something easier and simpler. But we are hurtling into the future, whether we like it or not. So the next campaign, whoever comes up for 2028, Megyn, should they be trying to instill a sense of hope for the future, put guardrails up against the technology that's coming at us, tell us that we are still in control in a moment when we feel so powerless?
Yeah, I even think it's a little bit more basic than that. I think the American people want solutions. I think they want to figure out how they can buy their groceries and keep their jobs, and that AI is not coming for everybody's job, and they're not going to be able to have a retirement or ever stop working. So I just think it's a little bit more basic. I think Democrats need to come up with solutions and see what solutions are going to carry us into the future and give people that sense of security. I think that's what people are really looking for these days.